My name is Rick Mokler, and I am with the National Head Start Association. I serve as the Chief Quality Improvement Officer and want to welcome you all for joining us and introduce our other presenters today. We will have Tim Nolan, who is the CEO, Executive Director of National Centers for Learning Excellence, and in that capacity he serves as a Head Start Director himself, a long-standing Head Start Director leader, including having also served as the board president for the Wisconsin Head Start Association, among other things. Also joining us is Kate Klingensmith, who is the product manager for ParentGauge with NHSA and based out in Silicon Valley. We are delighted to have you with us today to introduce this brand new resource for Head Start programs that has been in development now for several years and been piloted and ready for use this school year. So just as a housekeeping matter, given the number of folks on this call, we will have basically everyone on mute, but you're encouraged to ask questions by typing them into the text box, and you can also click to raise your hand, as it were, if you would like to actually speak a question, and we'll have opportunities for questions during the presentation on the demo presentation and also at the end of this call. So probably we're looking to present for about 45 minutes and then have at least a good 15 minutes for Q&A. The plan today is we'll give you a little background on the origins, the research and development of the ParentGauge tool. We will share with you the experience of the pilot this last year. Kate will walk us through a live demonstration of the software, and then I will talk through the timeline of how the programs will be using the instrument this year, how you can purchase a copy yourselves, or license the software, what kind of support you can expect with the tool, and then, as I mentioned, we'll have time for question and conversation. So at this point, I would like to turn the presentation over to Tim Nolan.
Well, thank you, Rick. I want to jump in and share where all of this came from. Back in late 2013, at a Region 5 Association board meeting, we got into a discussion starting with advocacy around what is it that we have that we can use to demonstrate to decision makers that our work with families actually matters. What do we have that's valid and reliable? And what we knew and what you know now is there's very little to support that discussion. And we created a question that then framed this research, which is, must we allow that we will only measure those things easy to measure as opposed to those things most important? And we saw the parent experience as being the most important thing that we needed more data on. And what happened is we opened up discussions with the University of Chicago, a group there that does about $35 million worth of research a year, big group that is well respected, has worked with ACF and Office of Head Start in other settings. So we approached them and got into initial discussions of, was this even possible? And they thought it could be, that one of the challenges would be that the technology would need to better support the gathering and analysis of data, and the obvious need, given the Office of Head Start directions, is that it must be valid and reliable so that we can defend it when questioned about why did we choose a particular either system or tool to gather data on how we're doing with families. So what happened was, in early 2014, we ended up getting to a point where we felt that there was great possibility Started discussions with NHSA at that point and sought funding. The Region 5 Association itself believed so strongly, we threw $60,000 into this project in order to get it rolling. And we were followed quickly by the Ford Foundation that NHSA had connections with, and the Rainin Foundation out of Oakland, California, who became the largest single giver of actual dollars for the research. The research moved forward strongly from a little late 2014 and continues today. One of the things that we wanted to make sure was that what got created was a tool that would be a tool for your use, a tool for practitioners to inform their work with families and be able to use that information to improve the quality of results of our work with families. And in order to assure that, we basically moved ourselves into a weekly oversight group meeting by telephone and sometimes face-to-face over that whole period. So about 40 times a year, we were on the phone talking about where we were with research, how to better tune it, how to look at what would make it most practical for use in Head Start settings. We had some very important non-negotiables. One of those was that we needed it to be a practitioner tool, essentially in a place where it could continue to support your work so that NHSA nor some other vendor would not own the data in a way that you could not access it. We wanted to make it very practical to get it to fit in with the visits that we are already required to do as we work with families. We developed a tool that would have a pre, mid, post capability and have been very excited around how it has moved forward. You can see from the slides, heavy duty piloting was done in 2016, 2017. Pre-work to that had also gone on, and all of it has been in partnership with folks in the field. So we've been dealing with Head Start grantees all the way through the process. And as you consider ParentGauge, obviously it's a choice for you. We've had the question of, is this required? The answer is no, it isn't required because it was not developed by Office of Head Start, nor a direct grantee of the Office of Head Start. And it's not required because we want it to be something that you embrace because it makes your work easier, makes your work better. What I will say is as we look at the future, you can see the trend already that the Office of Head Start is constantly looking for valid and reliable instruments that you can lean on in a monitoring exchange, a monitoring relationship. And we're proud to say that this is one of the very, very few, if not only, valid and reliable instruments to support the PFCE structure. And the tool was designed specifically with that PFCE framework in our minds in place. So I'm gonna move on to the next slide and talk about the goals for this tool. One was obviously to enable grantees to assess data across the PFCE framework through parent report. And what we sought to do was get the parent to be their own spokesperson. A number of agencies, including several of you on this call, have historically had surveys gather data. Some of it could be valid and reliable. We know in our review of the literature that was a part of this research project is that there really is no other tool that competes directly with what this parent gauge tool can do for you. So it is looking at parent report and being able to quantify that. As I mentioned, it's in full alignment with the OHS PFCE framework. We had an expert advisory panel that included people from the national centers and other folks who were highly recognized in our field for work with families and family outcomes. They have been convinced, and as we've gone through the process, stayed convinced that this is a unique tool that we're creating here. We think it's going to be very, very useful for you as a formative tool. In other words, a tool to help you shape your practice, shape your work with families. And as you look at the requirements, at this point, the tool offers English, Spanish, Arabic, and French translations. It is possible that others will be available in the future if there's sufficient demand. As we did a survey, these 4 were primary in terms of languages that are being spoken with families in quantities in agencies across the country. It's going to be a web-based tool so that it can be accessed by multiple different devices. So you could in fact be accessing it through tablet, smartphone, desktop computer, etc. So it could be done while you're in the field. It's administered by program staff, takes only 15 minutes or so. And in fact, if it takes longer, you should be happy about that, because at some level, when it takes longer, it's because the parent has opened up and is sharing rich data that will be more useful to you to inform your work. But we've designed it so it fits nicely with normal pre, mid, post data gathering with families in terms of what is it that the family is wanting to accomplish and how is that going at the midpoint or at the end of the year. You have the power to decide when you collect the data. So while we traditionally think of the school year and pre being sometime in August, September, early October at the latest, mid being December, January in that period, and post being at the end of a traditional school year, because Early Head Start is year-round, you may decide you want to have different schedules. That's completely in your hand, and what we're looking at is how to support that. One artifact that we discovered as we did the work of piloting is that just having the interviewer ask these questions and be recording these questions often gives them useful insights separate from broader crunching of data. In other words, many interviewers reported, as we debriefed them, reported that they had learned things about this parent just in the interview that they hadn't known before that, and could then use those immediately. Another thing that we learned, and just want to do a little bit of a plug here, is that the quality of interviewer skills has a major impact on the quality of the results that are gathered through the use of Parent Gauge. One of the things that you may want to consider is how do we make sure that the interviewers have the skills that they need. One of the things that we're dealing with at NHSA, we have a NHSA conference coming up in Austin, Texas for the parent conference. We hope to have a pre-event on interviewing skills there. We'll look to do other things to support you. We expect to have robust support available to you in face events, but a lot of things tied back to the website and the support that we can give you in easily accessible manner. One of the things to keep in mind is the type of reports that you ask for and receive will be something that you will be determining. So you can get reports at an individual early Head Start caseload or Head Start classroom level. You can do it at a center level. You can, in fact, do regions within your own grant. Some agencies have multiple regions within their grant. You can do it for all of the families being served within your grant. And on a voluntary basis, we already have some states looking at this as a means of gathering family outcomes data across the whole state. And again, those are states who are early into the process of statewide child outcomes data as well. So they're seeking to have that capacity. But it's in your hands, and we're obviously quite willing to give you our thoughts and ideas as you think through where do you use it. And we, in this two-layered instrument called ParentGauge, there are 25 closed-ended and 10 open-ended questions. And the closed-ended questions work well for pre-mid post because they're asking where the family is in terms of its process. And the second layer, where we're looking at both closed-ended and open-ended questions around the level of support they've experienced from their Head Start program. In that situation, we're using the tell me your experience of how has your Head Start program helped you with this particular dimension of the PFCE framework. With those, we're doing those as mid and post because they're based on having a history with Head Start. And we're assuming that people don't get a history until kind of mid-year. So then we have one last slide. And just to give you an idea of the research that has gone on behind this, 147 grantees participated in different levels of the piloting, but in the deep pilot. All 12 regions were represented. Approximately 1,000 interviews were done, and they were done on a very careful, scientifically determined, stratified random sample. So it's not just 1,000 interviews, but it is proportionate to Head Start or early Head Start or differences across regions. So what we're, the last piece I would share with you is in the pilot, one of the things that parents were most pleased with was just entering into the conversation of that is this data gathering and interview. They learned things about their own child's development just as a part of the measurement process, which is great because remember that this was not designed to be a scientific research project. It is designed to help you help parents be the best that they can be in whichever dimensions they're wanting to focus upon. So Rick, I'll hand it back to you.
Super, thanks, Tim. I just really want to acknowledge Tim's leadership on this project. I mean, he really was a champion among program directors who were, I think so many of us were frustrated when the PFCE framework first came out, and we were, programs were being asked to, do valid and reliable assessment aligned to it, and no such tool existed. So Tim really deserves a lot of credit for just helping make this thing happen. So just a few more things I wanted to share with you about this before we actually go into the live demonstration. One is what we are really proud of in the psychometric testing during the pilot is just the reliability scores. So the instrument is testing a couple of things. It's testing both the parents, report of the engagement with their child, but it's also reporting on their assessment of the program. And we found reliability scores, you see here, of upwards of 0.85 and 0.93, which anything over 0.50 is considered good, and as you get close to 1.0, it's considered quite strong. So we're really pleased on the psychometrics. And then another kind of key question on any software that has client data you appreciate is the privacy. And wanted to let you know that this was developed in compliance with the federal standards. The software has all the necessary encryption so that programs you get to control the permission levels for all the client data, and we'll talk about that more in the kind of the training portion when we about who has access, and then during the training that we'll offer for anyone who's subscribing how to do that. And then but that doesn't prevent us from being able to share anonymized data. And we're in my role, again, this is Rick, my role is leading quality improvement efforts, really supporting the field in your own local quality improvement. You will be able to see aggregated data and be able to see benchmark for what how are other programs doing, and how who are some high performers, and we'll protect program confidentiality, but our goal is to produce data that you all can use and really act on. So if you're interested in subscribing to this after this webinar, basically what you'll need to know is there's really three roles for how programs engage. One is each program would have one person identified as a systems administrator, and they would control all the kind of the access. And then there would be someone on the center level who would oversee it, and then you'd actually have the line staff who are conducting the interviews, whether it's family service staff or teachers, home visitors, and so forth. We make it easy by being able to import a lot of the demographic information and identifier information from Child Plus. If you have Child Plus, we're also developing the same kind of import from Promise program management software, and in the process of being able to develop similar imports from other kinds of software as well. You have the ability not only to be, this is all tablet-based or any kind of device-based, cloud-based software, but not only to be using that to check the kind of the yes, no, or the ranking questions, but also to record interviews. And then, as we mentioned, it's translated into several languages. So at this point, I would like to turn over the presentation to Kate Klingensmith to do a live demonstration for us.
Thanks, Rick. And hi, everyone. This is Kate Klingensmith. As Rick mentioned before, I am based out of California. I'm a product manager. Just a brief introduction to what a product manager does. I'm not only responsible for sort of helping to form the future roadmap of the product in terms of what features we'll be developing, but I'm going to be interacting directly with, hopefully you all, the subscribers to this software, and gathering your feedback and making sure that we are continuously improving your experience and giving you guys what you need. So without further ado, let me get everything set up here. I hope you can see my screen now. I want to give you a brief walkthrough of the tool itself. One of our main design principles is simplicity. So we wanted this tool to just be really easy and intuitive to use. So when somebody first logs in, they have essentially two main activities they might choose. One would be working with interviews directly, and one would be looking at progress, and that includes the reports. Just a side note, I'm logged in currently as a staff user. Like Rick mentioned, there are other roles that are more administrative, and they have more permission to manage accounts within their programs and centers and things like that. But so you can imagine that right now I'm a family services worker who wants to conduct an interview or review the interviews I've already conducted. All of this data is this is just dummy data, we call it. This is just for demonstration purposes. So this is not, these names are not real. The data that you see is not real. This is just to give you guys a good example of what you would be seeing if you use the tool. Okay, so I'm going to show you how easy it is to start an interview. All I would need to do, and again, you can see all of this is fairly intuitive. Just create an interview here. Like Rick mentioned, we have the ability to import data from Child Plus right now. The next system that we're working on is Promise. And what happens is at the center level, you could upload, your database from those various software programs, and it would pre-populate things like the child name, their guardian's name, their relationship to the guardian, the relationship to their teacher, and all of their demographic data. So it'd be really easy to just, if you noticed, I was just starting to type and it auto-suggested a name to me. Additionally, you can enter all of that in manually, and it's really easy to do also. So instead of starting a brand new interview, I'm going to show you one that was already completed. So I would go up here into management. I could either go back to the home page, or I could go here and look at my interviews. I'm going to use the filters on the side here. You can see that you can look through the interviews based on various different levels of whatever you are interested in looking at. So for example, if I wanted to just look at one teacher's classroom, I could go pull those. If I wanted to look at, like, let's say that I am Brian Galvan and I'm trying to look at just the interviews that I've conducted or begun, then I can just pull my own here. So we have a lot of good filtering options so to help you find exactly what you want to look at. I'm currently having to change the date range to find some of the data that we'd already entered. So I will go ahead and filter by, this was, in theory, the spring semester and going into the summer. I want to look at this one interview that was completed by Brian Galvan with Christina Marshall, who is the guardian of Paul Lopez. A few things I want to point out here. As we already mentioned, this is web-based, so that means that you can use a laptop, a tablet, even a cell phone to conduct these interviews. But we do understand sometimes there may be a home interview where you don't have Wi-Fi or cell signal, and so we do offer the option to print this questionnaire out. So you could see here it just is a PDF that you can print on paper and manually mark the answers to the questions. Now, you can also always go back in and edit an interview. This is important. Like we mentioned, there are both closed-ended and open-ended questions. Sometimes the open-ended questions generate really good conversation with a parent or guardian, and so we want to give the interviewers the opportunity to go back in and fill in those details after the conversation. Also, as we mentioned before, this tool allows you to record the interview right here within the instrument itself. If you were to choose to use a different audio recorder, like on your iPhone has an audio recording app, you can also upload a file. But if your microphone works on your device, then you can record just right here within the tool. Now, this is actually really important, and I want to bring up something that's on our future roadmap, which is going to be, we're working towards automatic transcription of the audio files. So you know how Siri or Alexa, or there are various devices out there that can take natural human language and turn it into text. We are working towards making that an option here as well, so that you wouldn't actually have to transcribe the open-ended questions. We want the system to do that for you. Another really great feature of ParentGauge is that we have included a lot of text to help the interviewers prompt the parents and families, so that they don't have to come up with, their own sort of questions and conversation. So we really designed this to make it easiest for interviewers to have just a really good, deep conversation to get at, parent engagement. So right here, what you're looking at is just the opening question. You could see we literally included things like, let's get started. This prompt here is a very open-ended question. Tell me about what the staff did to get to know you and your family. Now, this would be a question that would be more designed to ask in the middle of the program or at the end of the program. as we mentioned before, these questions are focused on two main areas. One are the parents and how they're engaged with their child, and then there's how the parents are engaged with the program. And so, for example, if you choose to do a beginning of the year interview, we've actually filtered the questions down so you wouldn't be asking questions about the program like this one before the family really have had a chance to engage. So again, this is just one open-ended question. I will show you another section of the questionnaire, which includes both closed and open-ended questions. So here, for example, this includes both program and parent closed-ended questions. So here's one example of a program-centered question. You would ask a parent, when I started with the program, the staff tried to learn about my family's interests and concerns. You can see that these are all sort of scored on a scale of 1 to 5, if you will. These are the questions that generate the reports. Additionally, here's something about like a parent focused question. I participate in activities that have helped me get my child ready for school. Okay, and so this is just filler text, but this is where an interviewer would record the parent's response. And they can always come back in and fill this in later. They could maybe take notes here during the interview, you know, little bulleted bullet points, but maybe come back in and fill in the actual complete response later. Okay, so what I want to show you now are the reports that are generated from these closed-ended questions. As we mentioned, you know, this is designed really to have at least 2 points in time during your program so you can measure your growth over time. So we have 2 types of reports. One is considered the baseline. You can see here, since I'm a staff member, I'm only able to see my one center. This is designed so that if you were, say, at the program level, you could actually see all of the centers within your program. And you can, again, filter these reports based on various different levels of, you know, what you're interested in. So for example, if I wanted to look at only early Head Start programs or classrooms within my center, then I could filter by that and the report would only show you that data. I could also filter by dates. I can look at just one teacher. I could look at, you know, the responses that are being gathered by one interviewer. These are all downloadable. So again, if you were to apply one of these filters to the report, you would only see what you wanted to see here. So you could always download the Excel spreadsheet. Now, I need to reset the date range again, because all of our data was set up for the spring. So here we are, I will filter. And now you can see the results from this program. We had 40 interviews conducted. You can see it broken down just very visually here to make it easy to understand. You know, on the parent scale, 1 to 5, 3.3 was the mean score. Program scale, same thing. And then for each and every question, you can also look at the mean scores. Now I'm going to show you the growth report, which is going to compare the baseline with the end of year interviews that were conducted. So here we are. What you're seeing here are, you know, the parent scale in the middle of the year, the parent results at the end of the year, same thing program. So also we have added some visual cues here to see time. So we have, you know, green means this is a positive impact over the course of that one school year. And then this also helps highlight for you, it's that some area had sort of dropped in the score. That would be some, you know, an area that you might want to focus on for improvement. I'm going to stop now and ask Victoria if we've had any questions, if there's anything specific while I'm still here live in the Parent Engage, you know, environment. Is there anything that anybody has asked specifically to see?
We actually haven't had any questions that you haven't already answered. But I'll take a quick second while we give people a chance to type in if they'd like. In the webinar dashboard, which is often on the right side of your screen, you can go into the questions section and submit any questions you have for us, and I'll read them out to everybody. So if you have any questions that might be helpful for me to ask in the demo, I would get those in right now. But we will also have a question and answer section at the end.
And while we're waiting, in case somebody is entering a question, I also just wanted to show we have a really extensive help section within the tool itself. So aside from having all of this really great, FAQ content and a few screencasts, sort of walkthroughs on how to accomplish certain tasks, we are also offering support in terms of tech support and continuous sort of training and improvement, like webinars to help you understand reports and, the soft interview skills. So all of that is included with your annual subscription. We have both email support as well as a 1-800 number.
Great, thanks for covering that, Kate. So we have actually had a few questions come in. So someone wants to clarify that if they're using COPA as opposed to, say, a Child Plus, which we have already, and Promise, for now they'll need to enter the data manually, correct?
That is correct. We are hoping in the future that we can actually accept uploads of any generic Excel file that you might be able to export from your software. It's just a matter of making sure that, like, training people to label the columns, so that our systems can talk with each other. But we are hoping to offer a more generic upload as well.
And just
Great.
to be clear, what this is the basic demographic data that you would already have in a system like Child Plus, so you don't have to duplicate it. It obviously, once that data is in, the experience is the same in the use of ParentGauge itself.
Great.
Tim?
Someone is also wondering if you could actually just go back to the reports and show a little bit what the baseline report looks like and what the growth report looks like.
Okay, sure. So the baseline report here, again, I need to reset the date ranges. By the way, the reason why the date ranges are so important is as a center, you would set the date range for yourselves. You would determine a window of time in which you wanted your interviews conducted, and that it sort of anchors that data to a certain point so that you can compare the different points in time to generate the growth report. So here again is the baseline report. So it goes question by question. If I wanted to look, let's see here, I'll just filter early Head Start. So we want to only look at early Head Start. Oh, so all of our data was actually conducted on regular Head Start. Was not. Oh, you know what? I need to change this. Well, doing this on the fly has not proved fruitful, but you can get the idea that you can filter this data in many different ways, and then you can export that filtered data on the report. So again, we're looking just, I need to reset everything here and then reset the date range again. I'm going to go to the growth report and show you that once again, because I'm going to have to reset the date there also. Okay. It stuck. So again, this is the growth report. This is so that you can compare what your scores were in the middle of your school year and at the end of your school year. And this is showing you question by question the change. So the mean, again, the sort of the average scores on a scale of 1 to 5, and then it can show you, was this a positive change or a negative change? Or if you don't see a colored indicator, that's because it's sort of statistically insignificant change. I hope that answers your questions.
Yeah, hopefully that sounds good. Someone's also wondering, one of the questions that you had showed up on the screen was about weekly home visits. And that's something that happens in early Head Start in some places, but how some of the questions adjust based on the child's demographic data, such as getting the Head Start versus early Head Start questions.
Sure. So the questions are filtered based on what you are looking to ask. And additionally, you can always just not answer a question. So I'll go back into the interviews themselves and show you how easy it is to just skip over something that's not relevant. I will go ahead and show you a closed-ended question. You can always just not answer something, and that has no impact whatsoever on the mean scores for that center's reporting.
Great, thanks. It looks like most of the questions that are in here can go in the regular. Rather, I think if you're all good, Kate, we'll pass it over to Rick. And if you've submitted questions, I promise I see them, and we'll get to them in just a minute.
Thanks, Victoria.
Great. And thank you. I just want to acknowledge for folks that Kate we were really intentional about wanting to maintain and continue to improve the quality of this instrument, and that, NHSA sees this as a resource for programs that's going to continue to grow and improve over time. And we're doing that both by maintaining the contract with the NORC at the University of Chicago, which is going to continue to support us around the analytics and the software development, but also by bringing in Kate, who really is responsible for ensuring that the user experience is optimal. So she's going to be working very closely with you all as subscribers to make sure, first, that you're getting the training and support you need, but also that if there are features or refinements that you think would improve your experience, that we will continue to incorporate that as well. So I just wanted to talk through what our timeline is for the next year as we're rolling this out. The software is, right now, we're just finishing up what we refer to as the kind of the code check on it, and we're confident that it was going to be released on Monday, August 28th, which will enable us that week to do the initial training for systems administrators. So whoever, when you purchase the software, you identify as the point of contact to manage the software in your, or at least to identify users in your program, will receive training. And then the following week, we'll be also training the line staff who would actually be conducting the interviewers. So we are ready to go, and that would enable you all as programs, if you chose to do baseline interviews in September, to be able to do that. And that's optional. But some of the programs have expressed an interest. We are in the process also of creating a user group that will be a resource for anyone who wanted that, and Kate will be supporting the online user group. The December and January will be that mid-year data collection point that we've described, and then April, May would be end-of-year data collection. So that would be the kind of the typical cycle. However, that is flexible for programs that aren't running on a traditional school year, and you really do have the ability, the prerogative locally to be able to adjust this to meet your needs. So for subscriptions, we have very intentionally priced this to be just as affordable as possible. We were lucky to be able to cover the initial research and development costs through some outside funding, as Tim mentioned, and so we are looking primarily just to have subscription costs cover the ongoing maintenance of the product, the analytics for the product, and the user support for you all. And the way that works is to subscribe for the next year. A program would pay a base usage fee of $1,500 plus $3 per family that's participating in the project, meaning for the number of families that will receive interviews over the next year. All NHSA members, which I think is probably most everyone on this call, will additionally receive a 15% discount off of that price. And then that's it. I mean, there's no extra costs for exporting your data or for doing additional analytics. Everything is bundled up in that price. We have a special provision for very small programs, meaning programs under 100 children, who would qualify for a discounted $800 base usage fee plus the $3 per child. But just to be clear, so say you're a program that has 300 children or 300 families, and you'll be using ParentGauge for all those families. That you'd be paying. There's a $1,500 base fee, and then 300 families times $3 each is $900. So it's 15 plus 900. That's $2,400, and then you subtract out the discount. So it'd be closer to around 2,000 is your actual final sales price. We recognize that some programs, first off, if you're a grantee with delegates, you only pay that base usage fee once. So you're not having to pay the usage fee for, for your delegate agencies. Some of the really large programs may choose just to, at least initially, do a random sample, and so they're only necessarily, say, the first year just testing it with a subgroup of their families. They would only pay, the per family charge for the actual families that they're using the instrument on. We're trying to make this just really easy to be able to use, affordable, and to be able to check out. Once you've subscribed to the tool, we will, as I mentioned, NORC will be supporting us on the training for administrators and line staff, but also we'll have technical assistance, meaning we'll have a call-in line and an email address where you can get specific questions answered that you might have. And then, over the course of the year, we'll actually be sharing with you, in addition to the reports that you receive, we'll be sharing with you some analytics on the larger aggregated data to support your, the new expectations OHS has around continuous quality improvement on the program level to support that. Kate, as I mentioned, will be supporting user groups, be really engaging you around feedback, and then she'll ensure that we're continuing to incorporate the revisions and improvements in the instrument that we're looking for. So to order, really all you need to do is go to the NHSA website. We've got the email address here. Include just your general regular contact information for your program, the number of families that you expect will be included, and then it's optional, but eventually we'll need whoever is identified to be your systems administrator to kind of oversee the permissions on the software. We've also got our email address here if you have questions for after the webinar. But at this point, let me turn over to you, Victoria, for questions that are coming in the text box, or if people have raised hands, and we'd love to. Tim and Kate and I would love to field questions.
Absolutely. So, kind of related to the pricing that you were just going over, is some questions about how the $3 per family works out. For example, some programs have, or all programs have specific funded slots, but then sometimes families add or drop during the year. And how would programs factor that into their subscription cost?
I'm happy to address this. Again, this is
Sure.
Kate. So, what we're hoping is when you do order the subscription, you make the most, accurate estimate as you possibly can. But to note, you won't be limited in the number of interviews that you've purchased. So, for example, if you say, okay, I'm going to interview 200 families this year, and then you end up wanting to interview 210, that's fine. You will not be limited. We're just, hoping that people will try to do their best estimate upon ordering.
We're looking at just the specific question around number of actual families versus sort of your census. I mean, we're thinking of this in terms of your census, so that if a family leaves, another one comes in, you would just pay for one family, not two.
Great. We've got another question about how ParentGauge aligns with the family engagement outcomes from OHS's PFCE framework.
Tim, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can jump in. The reality is the PFCE framework preceded our work on this tool. And from day one, we were looking at how do we develop a tool that will use the framework. And, obviously you can have various judgments on whether the framework works perfectly for you. Since it's OHS's expectations, we obviously adhered to it and found it pretty comprehensive. So essentially the questions are trackable back to each aspect of the parent framework, and because that was part of the assignment given to the scientist working on this, they adhered to it. It will be easy to defend to somebody who's asking, why did you choose ParentGauge and how does it fit with the PFCE framework? And just, I want to mention, so I don't forget, but this thing is, this whole process has been relatively cutting edge. Not only is it unique in being the first nationwide piloted instrument that has established both reliability and validity, but some of the upcoming steps that we have been working on and are continuing to work on are so cutting edge that the NORC project scientists working with us, we have actually had 2 of them pirated away by corporations with lots and lots of money, more than the University of Chicago, but not in a way that impacted our project negatively, but because it's so cutting edge. I mean, we're grappling here with, you know, the digitization of conversation. Once it's digitized through some use of artificial intelligence, we'll be able to draw trends out of it. That is very, very contemporary stuff, and we're excited about it.
Great, thanks, Tim. And I'm going to try and run through a few more questions in our last 5 minutes. So, Tim, while we actually have you here, because your program was actually part of the pilot,
Yep.
Could you share just briefly about the experience of your parent engagement coordinators with this and how they felt about using the tool, and then also anything you learned from them about, you know, who did the interview versus who was actually interacting with the families the most, and what lessons you learned?
I'll focus primarily on our place because I also obviously have spent a lot of time listening to the experience of others. What we found is it's a relatively easy instrument to use, that the kind of upfront learning time on it was not difficult. We've tried it both with people who have deep trust relationships with the parent being interviewed and somebody else from the agency. We're believing that quality of data is improved by using people who are familiar to the parent, but that's a decision that I think each of the grantees are going to have to make on your own, who is most appropriate. For instance, if we were focused on research, we would want somebody who might be more neutral. If we're focused on improving quality of service, we want the best data possible to enable us to move forward. And you could certainly do a mix of that as you look at how to use ParentGauge in your own agency. Relatively easy to use. Daunting to capture the conversation. So one of the things we noticed is sometimes interviewers almost want to cut a parent short from an efficiency standpoint. We certainly had to train around that because oftentimes the second thing the parent is saying is richer than whatever came out first. So, you know, it's one of those things that requires getting used to. But we found it quite easy to use. There were concerns about time that, you know, they were seeing this as adding on. What I encourage them to look at is you already are meeting with parents no less frequently than pre, mid, post. This is a tool to be fed into that process. It's a tool that replaces the locally designed tool that we've been using for a number of years, and we didn't have either the resource or the need to try to get that tool to be valid and reliable. So it was a nice complementary piece. I'll stop there.
Great, thank you. We also, let me see. Rick, do you want to just cover, we've got some questions about people asking to see all of the questions in the tool, or if they could at least see some questions from each of the PFCE domains. Do you want to?
Sure. So as mentioned, the questions are really kind of organized around the various domains. We are in the process of putting up something on our website, the ParentGauge website, that is a sample of questions. I mean, we're, since it is a copyrighted instrument now, we won't be posting all of the questions, but we will have a couple sections worth of questions to give folks a feel for the approach. I mean, it's how we're kind of how we address each of these particular domains. And the way we've organized, and we have typically paired questions. Initially, one in the first question of the pair is asking the parent about their engagement, and the second question is asking the parent about how much the program supported them in that. So, Kate, I think we can probably get that up in the next 2 days. But if that's not enough, if after you've gone on the website, if you still feel like you need additional, information, you need a more comprehensive list of the questions to make a decision in your program, let us know. Shoot us an email, and we'll work with you to get you the information you need to make a decision.
And I would just say quickly, we were very, very careful to have questions that were not particularly controversial or tricky. We had very little feedback from anybody in the piloting process around some questions being inappropriate. The nature of piloting is looking for something, is there a way to clarify something? But yeah, and I'm very supportive of what Rick is saying, is we want to support you being able to make a solid decision and see this as a really important tool for you.
Great, thank you guys. So we're coming up just on the end of the hour here, and so I know there are a good handful of questions that we just haven't had time to get to. I tried to kind of pull the most asked and hopefully most relevant questions to everyone, but I did just want to let you know that we have our ParentGauge website. There's also an FAQ page on there where a lot of these questions are answered, and we are absolutely going to be keeping track of the questions that were asked in the webinar, and some of them we'll put up on the FAQ page with additional information. If there are any specific concerns you have, I would also send us an email, and we'd be happy to answer them directly.
So how about this, Victoria? I appreciate folks scheduled an hour, and we'll maybe need to drop off now, and including Tim, I think, as a presenter. But I mean, I would be willing to stay on the line for a few more minutes, and maybe Kate, if you could too. If there are particular questions you feel, Victoria, that that would be useful to address now while folks may still be on the line.
And I'm going to say goodbye because I'm a presenter on another NHSA webinar starting 1 minute ago.
All right.
Okay,
thank you so much, Tim. Really helpful.
Great. All right, then let's continue for just a couple minutes. We've got a question about the data and whether the data are shared with parents in any way, and whether it's the parents interacting with the tool or the program more directly.
So
I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, go ahead, Kate.
I was just going to say, no, the parents would never be logging into the system. This is really intended for, staff members and, center and program administrators. I think it would be up to each individual center whether or not they wanted to share out the data. But otherwise, the parents, they're not really interacting with the system directly.
And that's very intentional. First off, I mean, we feel like we get higher quality information, but besides that, we really see this as a resource to support staff in their direct work with parents. So it's not, I mean, we're not thinking of this as just a survey of parents. We're thinking this is a true assessment.
Great. There's also a question about the open questions. And could you just cover briefly what information is pulled out of those right now, and then what some of our future plans are?
Sure. So we were really intentional in the initial research and the design of this instrument. First off, to make it strength-based, but secondly, to key in around the themes that the parents themselves identify and consider to be most important. And you know, oftentimes, as you all know, I mean, with assessments, that isn't always the case. So that's why we're using this kind of digitized interview process of, you know, not only having, you know, professional researchers code themes that they came out of parent interviews and parent-directed interviews, but using even, you know, artificial intelligence to pull it out. And so what we feel is most valuable is, you know, staff hearing the themes coming from parents where they're expressing themselves. Now, so probably the single most important value is what your, you know, staff is getting from, you know, their meetings with the parents. But secondly, the reason we want it recorded is because it will be feeding into our larger research and ongoing kind of database, and which will be continuing to educate us about how Head Start does its work around parent engagement. I mean, I think I feel really strongly, and many on the team do, that while there's been an enormous amount of research that's gone into child outcomes and you know, child engagement in you know, early childhood, that the parent engagement, there hasn't been a commensurate level of work. So this is our opportunity as a field to really move things forward. So our plan in kind of as this moves forward is to capitalize on those interviews for our ongoing research to continue to inform refinement of the tool, and frankly, to be sharing with you all some of the themes that we are hearing as we move forward. Now we may need additional, you know, outside, you know, foundation support to do that next lift of research, but that's why that's part of why, you know, the record feature is built in to the instrument as it is. I'm hoping that addressed answered your question.
Yeah, great. There's also a question about, are there any initial setup procedures for the programs, and how would those get taken care of?
Kate, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So yes, there are. The plan is to start training the program level admins. August 30th would be our first training, and there'd be another one on September 1st. That's a Wednesday and a Friday coming up in just a couple of weeks. That training will be specifically focused on both the program and center level admins on how to create their staff accounts. That's the only setup necessary. So basically creating accounts for people that would be conducting the interviews, or anybody within your, you know, centers and programs that would want access to the reports.
And to be clear, I mean, this is all cloud-based, so you don't have, you know, programs do not need to worry about, you know, loading in software to servers or anything like that.
Great. We've also got a question about training and whether kind of the ongoing training will be on demand, live, whether it will be online. Kind of, do programs need to get their staff together all at once? Will they be able to access it at later times?
Sure. So yeah, for each of these trainings, so there's, you know, like I just mentioned, the admin training, that's going to be fairly straightforward. It's just, you know, how to create accounts for your staff. The second type of training that we'll be offering at the beginning of this school year is for your staff and how to actually conduct the interviews, how to use ParentGauge. So those trainings, we're going to be offering them at a couple different times and dates. Hopefully finding, you know, availability with your staff will, you know, that'll help. But they'll also be recorded and posted within the tool themselves, within that guide, within all of the help information. And then, like we mentioned before, we're always available for support. So we do have our email address, and we also have a 1-800 number for very specific questions. But we believe the tool is really designed to be intuitive to use. So the training and then the recording of the trainings will hopefully get you all set with everything you need to know.
Great. We've got a question about the growth reports and whether programs will be able to compare data across even multiple years, even just as opposed to just beginning and end. or middle and end?
Yes, yeah, the answer is yes. I mean, we're absolutely committed to this data being a longitudinal resource for programs over time. So that's one of the, I mean, for this first year, obviously it's not an issue, but that's one of the options that we are building in for next year.
Great. For programs that don't use Child Plus and rather use Promise or another system, should they hold off on purchasing ParentGauge until it's compatible, or should they go ahead and get it now?
Oh, there's no, I mean, there's no downside to going ahead and subscribing now. I mean, we would encourage you to go ahead and make the move now, and we are, working. So it would mean that you'll need to, code in or type in, the individual family names. But there's, once that's done, once you've input that information, it'll be, the next year, if presuming we've got all that input automated, that would just work seamlessly for someone who's, say, using COPA or another non-Child Plus system.
Great. There's also a question about whether we can get the data to move backwards, kind of from ParentGauge into whatever their data management system is.
I mean, that's our goal. We are actually initiating that conversation now with some of the vendors. I mean, we realized it would be easier just to release the software and have our programs, having Head Start programs starting to use it. Oftentimes, vendors are reluctant to build in those kinds of functionalities until they see some adoption in the field. I mean, given the interest we've seen in this instrument and the attendance in the webinars up through now, we're feeling that pretty confident that we'll see receptivity from the the various software providers. So we're committed to working with them to build in that capacity.
Great. And then I think the last kind of broadly applicable question is for programs that also have kids from state-funded pre-K in their classrooms, how would those children be dealt with when it comes to ParentGauge?
So the say state pre-K kids, certainly can be included in the interviews. Or their families can be. It's really a judgment call, I think, by programs, because this instrument clearly, because it's aligned to the OHS PFC framework, I mean, it's intended to work with families that are receiving a certain level of service, a certain type of service. And so, the questions would have the most relevance, to families, that have that kind of support. However, if you as a program see a value to it, then you certainly would have that prerogative. I don't know, Kate, if you wanted to add anything to that.
No, yeah, I mean, you can interview families from Head Start children or non-Head Start. I think the data you'll collect will help you, inform you, regardless of, how you categorize those children and those families.
Great. So I think that's going to be it for the webinar this time around. Again, we've got some information up on our website, which you can see on the screen. And then also we are absolutely happy to answer questions via email if you want to send us anything else at parentgauge@nhsa.org.
All right. Well, I thank you, Victoria. Thanks for managing the webinar, and Kate for joining us on this. On behalf of all of us and NHSA, want to thank all of you for joining us on today's call, and we're really looking forward to working with many of you over the next year on this instrument, and really see it as something that's community-driven, that Head Start community-driven, and looking forward to that collaboration. So have a great day and a great week, and I'm sure many of us will be talking. Thanks. Goodbye.